Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this first episode of the Melbourne AWS User Group podcast. Again, we will be talking about what is new in the world of AWS, and this time, as you might notice from the dates, we'll be talking about what's new in May 2020. Once again, joining me for this are my good friends Jean-Manuel and Guy.
Hello.
Hello.
Very happy to be here.
And we're happy to have you. And as always, we'll start with finally in Sydney, all the new stuff that we got here. And we've actually got quite a few again this month. I guess one of the big ones to come out, and that's just in general, is Macy.
Yeah, very nice to see a significant price reduction on Macy, and to see it in Sydney at the same time, because it's a pretty interesting service and quite useful for some customers, I think. But yeah, it was very much priced at a point where you were going to have some pretty serious money to really enable you to really use it full time. But yeah, they've spent many months apparently re-architecting the data discovery engine and updating their ML models, and also apparently making better use of S3. So they've been able to, through a combination of all this sort of re-architecting, they've been able to find all these savings, which is maybe an object lesson for all of us in re-architecting our workloads and making them more cost optimized. So they're eating their own dog food.
Yeah, I had a look at the price. It's still not cheap, right? It's like $1 a gig. So it's $1 a gig in the US and $1.25 here in Australia. And if you have a terabyte in your S3 bucket, the first time you ingest it, that's $2,000. And then every time you have the terabyte, that's $2,000. So it's not for the, faint-hearted. If you want to scan a lot of data, a petabyte of data, that's going to be a serious amount of money.
Yeah, but imagine how much more it was before the 80 to 90% price
reduction.
reduction.
I didn't look at it because he was not in Sydney at the time, so I didn't look at it. But, $2,000 per terabyte, don't put your movies in there. You really need to pick the bucket you want to scan to make sure that you don't have that extra cost scanning data you don't need.
Yeah, let's make clear here about what Macy actually is. It's a service that scans for PII data and masks that, so that your log files that might have personal identifiable data are no longer containing that data. And a breach of that data, if there is something that happens and it gets out, that can be a lot more costly than $2,000 per
terabyte. Yeah, 100% agree. So, for PCI regulated enterprise or PI information, GDPR and all that absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
A couple other services that were released. We actually got two that are only in preview, which is Fraud Detector. I haven't played around with that myself yet. Have either of you?
No, but I had a look at the doc, and it's really for people who run carts and online purchase and stuff like that, where they can put some email in the back and then try to, detect people who do guest checkouts, and then people who do online payment. That's coming soon, I think, and some account verification to try to avoid fraud on your website, and using the Amazon kind of history and knowledge of this kind of product. So it's not for everyone, right? It's really focused on people who run the shops online.
Yeah. And the other preview service is RDS Proxy. We talked about this last month as well when it became available for Postgres, and we were lamenting that it wasn't in Sydney yet.
Yeah.
And
they were listening.
Yeah, it's still in preview.
Yeah. It's been in preview now for a long time, I think. Yeah, since reInvent. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with a bit of luck, it will show up in What's New again next month, and we can talk about how it's now available.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
There was as well a price reduction, right, between regions. So that's when I look at it, is between EC2's instances, right? Because when you do Transit Gateway, Interconnect, when you do Direct Connect Gateway connection, stuff like that, that's a different pricing. So this pricing is really from EC2 to another EC2 into another region. So instead of paying the internet egress cost, you pay a reduced rate to talk to that other region. So if you have VPN or other things like that to talk across region, that's a good reduction in price for 9 cents. So it's good.
Yep. We always love price reductions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the last thing that was announced is the RDS Data API and Query Editor. This was really announced just this morning that they are now available in Sydney. Again, this is not something I have really used.
Yeah, no, I haven't used it either. The Data API, as I understand it, it kind of just gives you another way of querying your RDS without having to use SQL. Basically, you've got an API to do those sort of operations instead.
Yeah, it's a HTTPS endpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, the API is actually nice for serverless actions, from what I understand.
So under the hood, is it managing? It must be managing the database connections and doing all that sort of stuff for you.
Yeah, it says that you don't have to install an ODBC connector or ODBC client. You can do it through HTTPS, through the RDS query editor, basically, and then manage that for you. So it's interesting that some customers don't want to have connectivity between on-prem and the database. So that could be an option to be able to do edit without having full SQL query from workstation. So that's interesting. Yeah. It's for Aurora though. Yeah, only.
And yeah, obviously then for Aurora serverless, it's definitely a nice way of interacting. And speaking of serverless, let's have a look at some of the things that were announced for serverless. Anything that jumps out for either of you?
I think it's there's obviously a second step functions related announcement today. So the other day there was the step functions supporting code build, the service integration, which is interesting. And so step functions now, I think it's got an integration with code pipeline and code build. So one way or the other, cross-directional, if you know what I mean. And today the support in SAM for step functions, which I was just looking at before we did this meeting, but that kind of looks interesting as a way of, I guess, creating your step functions. Gives you a SAM-based way of defining your state machine and deploying it, which might make it a bit easier to...
often with anything CloudFormation, it seems a bit verbose, and you end up setting a lot of flags and things like that. And hopefully with SAM, that becomes a little bit more readable for step functions, at least similar to what they do for basic Lambda functions with just the serverless function there.
That makes sense, yeah. But the step function with code build, that will probably help some people orchestrating some image building or some testing, and then, if errors come back to this and start again, where it was probably code pipeline couldn't do that. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So the two use cases they call out particularly is running multiple builds in parallel. So if you've got like a multi-component application that needs to deploy, from this repo, this repo, this repo, this repo, you've got multiple pipelines for those individual application components.
Yeah.
You can have them all deployed in parallel using step functions. The other use case that they mentioned was that you could disable testing for a period of so you could run step functions and tell it you don't want to run your test suite, and the logic branch will just skip that bit and go straight to the next step.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. I think especially coming out of when you're working with customers who have existing maybe gnarly complex deployments that they're currently doing because they've got a lot of tightly coupled sort of application components. They've got a front end and a back end, and they've got this thing has to be updated before that thing, and all those sorts of non-ideal sort of scenarios. Step functions, I think, can sort of step into that. To excuse the pun, step into that gap and give you a way of orchestrating some of those more complex scenarios.
Yeah. Control your email flow with Amazon Workmail using Lambda.
I was just going to ask Arjen how he's going with his Outlook rules using Workmail.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right?
Oh yeah, it's wonderful. I can be very negative about this, or I can be, yes, this has potential. On the one hand, it seems like overkill for basically most rules that you would want for your email. On the other hand, it makes it a lot more extensible.
Yeah.
But I suspect most people would just prefer to have simple checkboxes they can tick or filter rules or things like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I'm just trying to think. I mean, I use Workmail just because I needed to move my email somewhere, and I'd hosted it myself for many, many years. And of course, when I ditched all my own hosted infrastructure, I wanted to put my mail somewhere, and I thought, oh, well, I'll see what AWS Workmail looks like. And, it's a little bit on the pricey side, I guess. It's like $5 per month, I think, per mailbox. But I've got lots of different email domains, so they all just go to the one place, and I just use client-side rules to move them around. So it works quite well for me. And, of course, you can just, set up client-side rules too, and I'm sure most people probably would use them. But if you want server-side rules, I guess Lambda, as you say, it's certainly going to give you all the things. You can certainly do pretty much anything you want to do with with your email using that. Is it hitting a walnut with a sledgehammer? Yeah.
Yes.
But I guess Workmail strikes me as one of those services, and I've really got no idea how many customers they've got on it. But they've probably got a few biggish corporate kind of customers on it who probably insisted they give them something to do server-side mail rules. So maybe that's why. I don't know.
Like an out of office or a spamming checks or something. You do that with Lambda in Python. Yeah.
Anyway, shall we move on?
Yeah, we move on.
Containers, everybody's favorite.
Your favorite. I'll just sit here and wait for you to finish. Wake me up when you're done.
I'm very happy that this morning actually something from my favorite did get added, or maybe yesterday, which is that Filegate now encrypts data stored on the ephemeral volume.
Right.
So that's good.
Yeah, but he encrypted not with the CMK, right? He encrypted with a general AWS key. So for regulated enterprise, it's much better because at least it's encrypted. But they're still, I think, not going to use it until they can provide their own keys.
But yeah, I should say it is an improvement. So
definitely, yeah.
Improvements are always good to see. EKS is updated to support Kubernetes version 1.16, which is nice, so that it's a couple less versions behind whatever current is, if it's still 1.18 or 1.19 already.
So yeah, every 3 months Kubernetes releases a new version, right?
Yes.
So and that's fast paced. So what AWS does is you can have only 3 versions available. So by the 30th of June, all the 1.13 version will be upgraded automatically by AWS to 1.14. So it's very important that you do it yourself, I think, because you can break things. But you can have only 16, 15, 14 now inside the AWS space with EKS and not the full suite. So interesting to know. And remember the security model from AWS, right? That's your problem. You need to upgrade it yourself, otherwise they're going to do it for you. So,
yeah, in a way that is a bit of a downside with EKS, that you need to keep up on upgrading your versions. On the other hand, it means that you should also make sure that you're patching all the latest issues that way.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So no more 1.13 from the 30th of June.
I think as a policy that's a good thing, and I'd love to see it. If the world worked that way in the technology space, because we've all, I'm sure, suffered the consequences of environments where things have got so badly out of date that the problem of keeping it running at some point becomes a major problem. So in a way, it's kind of nice that you've got AWS kind of making that decision for you and making that decision for your boss. So, your boss can't say, oh, no, don't bother updating to the latest Kubernetes version. We'll just let it run for the next 3 years. It's like, well, yes. Sure, boss, you can do that, but it's going to stop working because AWS is going to stop supporting it. They can't do that. We insist we want to keep running 1.16 for the next 3 years. They can't, they're often, used to Microsoft style, lifespans for things. And that's it. The less of that we have in the world, the better, I think.
Yeah, it's a managed service. So I understand AWS, they need to push people to update like RDS and stuff. They don't support all the version to to the ancient time, right? So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Good thing.
The other thing I find interesting is that they now in ECR there's now support for multi-architecture images through manifest lists, so that you can have the same image released for multiple architectures. Obviously, the only two that are relevant for anything you run in AWS are Intel or AMD 64 and ARM 64, but it's still good to see that, so that you can more easily mix and match your ARM instances with Intel instances.
Yeah. I had a look at the CDK for Kubernetes. Did you have a look at that? It looked like the same CDK for the AWS CDK. It looked like the same process, right? It supports TypeScript and Python, and then from that CDK, you simplify your YAML manifest file into a simple command. So that generates manifest file for you. That can work with EKS, that work with on-prem, that work with other Kubernetes. So it's interesting. It's like AWS open sourcing that product to help people creating YAML files. It's interesting.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to play around with it yet, and it's definitely something I want to, because if it makes managing that easier, even if it's just for all those environments where the only thing changes is one or two variables, if it cleans that up, that would actually be really nice.
It's in alpha release though, so it's still a long way to go to have a full version. But it's an interesting product, and really based on the same philosophy that the AWS CDK for CloudFormation. You get from a simple Python or TypeScript to a very verbose CloudFormation. So it's the same idea.
And the good thing, even if it is just alpha, is that you can still use it to generate your templates, because you don't have to completely shoot it against your cluster. So you have a chance to review, and so it might still make things easier.
Yeah.
Let's move on though to EasyTo and PPC.
Okay.
So there's a few things in here. I know Jean-Manuel, you love networking, so you probably like the idea of the route analyzer.
Oh yeah, I love this one. I mean, it's not for everyone, right?
That's right. Your weird obsessions are welcome here.
When you have customers who have multiple transit gateways across multiple regions, across multiple environments, then that's going to help a lot, I think, to really analyze the route, see where your routing problem can become a problem, and then test your route as well before you deploy them. I found that Transit Gateway is fantastic product, centralized, multi-AZ, all of that, but it doesn't prevent you for human error. If a guy changes a route, you can bring down your whole production environment. So I think that product, in complement to Transit Gateway Network Manager, will help really networking people understanding the impact of the change they're going to do on routes with direct connect included and multi-region. So it's going to be a very nice product. And it's all, visualized with a nice GUI. I like it.
Cool. Yeah, the EC2 aliases. It was kind of, when I looked at that, I thought, that sounds good. And then I sort of dug a little bit deeper, and it's a bit weird. Like the documentation actually doesn't mention EC2 aliases in it, which you'd expect given they've announced aliases for AMIs that the documentation would say that, but it doesn't. So it's actually just a new parameter type in parameter store that checks that your AMI ID is valid and present in the account. So
your what ID?
Your AMI ID. Your AMI ID. What? Are you picking on me?
For that, yes.
Okay. I think that's exactly. I'm basically quoting the documentation, I think.
But then in your CloudFormation template, you will be able to have that alias like you use with keys, right? You have an alias for your keys, and then you can change your AMI ID in there, and then update your patch every month and your new golden image, and your code doesn't change. I think that doesn't help.
Yeah, but I mean, you could do that before, and people did do it before, just using parameter store, right? You put the AMI ID in, and you did it yourself. So all it really is they've just added a data type, which actually does some checking for you. So so you can't insert something that's wrong. That's really the release. That's what they've added. But if you go and look at the documentation, you'll see it actually doesn't refer to aliases in there. It just says there's a new parameter type.
So it would be interesting to see CloudFormation, how we're going to call, instead of doing a map now for AMI per region, are we going to do a fetch to SSM, or what do you think? What's going to happen? Arjen, do you think?
That's how I've been doing it for a very long time. I always I've always had in the build pipelines that build the AMIs, they will write to a parameter store object.
Yeah.
They will write to AMI ID there once it's done and all good and things like that. And then the CloudFormation template will have a parameter for that parameter store object. Every time you run CloudFormation, it will pull the latest out and it will be there.
So how do you seed your parameter store? You have CloudFormation to do the seeding of the SSM parameter, and then you have another template to do the AMI deployment. EasyTo?
So it depends, actually. So if you just use a base image, so AWS has already offered many of the standard images as parameter store objects.
Oh, the latest one. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Yep. So you can use, obviously using those is easy, and otherwise you make it part of your build pipeline for your images.
Yeah. So if you're using Image Builder, right, and you're creating new AMIs from that, then you'd have a process that just updates the parameter store.
Yeah, in each account, and then
So you can see why I was confused, right? Because they made it sound like it was a new product, and it isn't really. Or they made it sound like it was something new. Which if the announcement was we've now got an AMI ID type in parameter store, then that would have been fine. Anyway, never mind. It's all good still, so not unhappy.
There is other SSM, I think, update with you can fetch AZs now, you can fetch regions, you can fetch other things in there. I think that help as well a lot for when you use CloudFormation, when you use Terraform or the type of tool to fetch information for the account. That's good.
Yeah, definitely. So the other thing from here that I personally am really interested in, and I'm sad that it's not available in Sydney, is the new M6G instances. So these are the new Graviton 2 processors from AWS, which are the ARM processors that they've now basically changed to just being a suffix to other instance types. But from all the stats that they showed at reInvent, at least, these seem really powerful for a lower price. So especially if you are running things like containers or applications that are not tied to Intel architectures, this might help with cost savings as well as performance improvements.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. But not in Sydney, you said. So it's a shame. Another networking stuff, I think, which is great, is bring your IPv6. So now you can bring your own IPv6 to AWS, and a lot of regulated enterprise cannot use, generated, and they want to control that IPv6. So you need to own that IPv6 range. Obviously, you need to be a /48 if it's public, or 56 if it is private. But you can bring it to AWS and start consuming it inside your VPC or inside your other load balancers and stuff like that. So that's good, and that is in Sydney as well. Two other network things. There is 2 private link coming this month. One for license manager, which is nothing special. But then one for ECS, which I think is pretty good to be able to SES, sorry, SES, yes. And SES is in Sydney, but reading the doc and going well in detail, you can't receive from Sydney. You can only send. The only 2 regions you can receive email is Virginia, Oregon, and Ireland. So it's interesting. You have the private link. You can send an email through staying in your VPC and accessing the AWS services this way, but you cannot receive them.
But what would that even mean to receive email with private link? Because the internet, right?
No, it's not that. It's probably my mistake as well. Private link is one way only anyway, right? So it's a NLB in the back end. So you cannot use SES in Sydney to receive email. So I don't know. I don't have any customer using SES here, but do you guys have one? How they send email from Sydney and then they receive it from Oregon? How does that work?
It's usually just only sending.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's 90+% of the use cases are probably just they're using SES to send outbound mail, not receiving it.
Yep. Let's have a look at the security stuff now. So actually quite a big one that came out this morning that is interesting, and I need to see it in practice before I have any idea how it's going to be used, is that you can now use AWS SSO with Okta.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that too. Okta gets in everywhere, don't they?
And it's free. And you have a free version of Okta, which is cool. Mm-hmm. So you can do it. And I know, Arjen, you always rant about SSO is manual, is GUI and stuff like that. I found out that you have that system with cross-domain identity management. So you create the user in Okta and you get pushed automatically to SSO. That's creating your automation link, right? That's the idea.
Well, that's only for user provisioning. User provisioning was possible already with AD or even Azure AD.
Oh, okay.
So it's interesting that you can now. It's interesting that you can now do it with Okta as well, and then it sounds like the idea is that you then use this to provision your Okta users with their AWS access. So I'm guessing, and again, I haven't tried this out, that you, as a user, you would log into Okta, you click on AWS, and you get redirected to AWS SSO, where you can then see all your...
The account with the page, yeah, the page they display, yeah.
Yeah, instead of the generic role picker that you have usually from within Okta.
I wonder whether, so, I mean, from my fading recollection of Okta, it's got quite a lot of sort of tools for configuring users. So would those tools be used to configure what access to applications within AWS you had? Do you think that that's supported, or would you still need to be doing that kind of setup in AWS? Or can you perhaps specify in Okta that this user has this role when they log in?
Well, in Okta, you can sync that with your AD, right? So you have the Okta user management, and then you can have AD sync to Okta, and then Okta sync to SSO.
So how many other identity providers can we pop in this chain?
Well, I assume that the AD that Jay mentions here is just Azure AD, so that we are completely
trigger warning. Yeah. It's a very popular service and probably quite good. I shouldn't.
But at scale, I heard it was expensive. The user cost for Okta at scale is quite dear.
It is. It is expensive. It is expensive. Yeah, we priced up Okta versus Auth0, and they both end up quite expensive at scale. Like we're talking hundreds of thousands of users. They do add up.
But identity is a big thing, right? And yeah.
Yeah, look, but I mean, I think if you weigh up the benefits of offloading that stuff to a capable SaaS type product, I think it makes sense still. Like even at even the sort of numbers that we're talking there.
Managing your own IDFS on-prem, yeah.
Yeah, no, pass. It's just not interesting enough. I want all the boring jobs to be done by robots. So, that's a boring job.
Yep. But speaking of identity management, Client VPN now supports SAML 2 as well, which means you have more options now for provisioning users there, which is good. I didn't check if it's actually integrated with AWS SSO yet. It would be nice if that was the case.
Oh, yeah.
But
you create an IDP, apparently. An IDP with SAML 2, and that should work. So that's probably just what SSO needs, right?
Yeah, I've seen other AWS services like JDBC connectors for Redshift. They support several SAML 2 services, but not AWS SSO.
All right. Okay. Interesting. Security on EKS. Do you want to talk about that? There is a new guide who just came out, and I think it's really big and really massive guide. And I like it because it's show people that, excuse for my rant now, but EKS is a cloud on top of the cloud, right? So on top of AWS. So with the shared responsibility model, people think that EKS is a managed service and AWS is going to do everything for me. It's not true. They just manage the nodes for you. The masters for you, not the nodes. And all the rest, all the security, plugin and monitoring and logging and load balancing integration and CNI plugin and all of that, that's your problem. And I think that shows the size of the task to run an EKS cluster in production in AWS the proper way. So it's good guide, but big one.
Yeah. So it means people have some reading to do.
And didn't we have a candidate for didn't it always do that in this section too? The zero downtime certificate rotation. That's been announced, so that's kind of handy. It means you can rotate your certificate with zero downtime. Yay!
Yep, and this is for AWS SSO.
Yeah.
The config rules from Performance Pack. You could do it only from the master account, which is not the best security posture before. Now you can do it from a dedicated member account. So you can push config rules across all your org at the OU level, and then make sure that you have EBS encrypted or you have S3 non-public and stuff like that config rules pushed for your org, but you don't have to do it for master now. You can do it from a security or audit account. And they use that naming because it match with Control Tower, which I'm sure that probably going to pop up into Control Tower very soon as a new feature to be able to push config rules across.
Yeah, I like this ability. Mostly because hopefully that means more and more services will not need to run from the master account. Because there are still, like we've talked about AWS SSO before, you need to run that from the master account, which means that you need to give people who need to manage users or manage groups, things like that, which, as we've mentioned before, is all click work still. You need to grant those people access to your master account, while usually you would want the least number of people to have access to that account.
Yeah, great. And the biggest problem for me to using the master account is you cannot apply an SCP on it. So this account is kind of a naked account that you can't apply any control on it, and you just rely on the goodwill of the user, which is really not a good posture for an enterprise. So master account should be empty, should have no VPCs, no users, just the minimum billing stuff. Yeah.
Yep. Let's have a look at DevOps now. I see one product basically showing up on this list a lot.
Yep, it's a fine time to be a Java developer.
Code Guru, yeah.
But has anyone seen the new Cloud9 theme?
I checked, it's just a jet dark themes. It was in preview for a while. It's just dark now. You can have your cloud now look like your studio code. So yeah, nothing special, just black.
That was probably the order. Make it look like Visual Studio Code. No one's using it. How do we get developer adoption?
But it is in Sydney, right? It came recently, Cloud9, so I need to have a look at that.
Yeah, it is actually quite useful at times. I've seen it used a lot as well for things like workshops, where it's easy to get something spun up quickly. You don't have to worry about people having access on their local machine, and if you just spin up a Cloud9 instance, you can run everything from there.
Do you mean it's been developed for the AWS SA to do trainings?
Basically, that's my only experience of it too. But yeah, I'm sure. Actually, I think I heard of a customer the other day who was actually using it for their team. So I mean, I guess this all takes all sorts, right? So yeah, it probably makes sense.
Yeah. I know that it's recommended often by the Programming and Tools workshop that's also here in Melbourne. They often use it as a quick way to get people started because they always run workshop for their meetups. And this is just a good way to get people so they don't have to worry about configuring everything on their local machine.
Yeah, makes sense, yeah.
And can you use it for pair programming? Like if you're both remote? I think it's a vague idea that you can. Maybe that's a faulty recollection. Yeah, no, you can. It's I just pulled it up quickly. Yes, you can. You can do collaborative development, code together in real time. It's got a little graphic of a screen share with the dark mode, showing 3 developers busily tapping away at the same piece of code. So there you go.
Oh yeah, cool.
So maybe in this age of COVID and increased working from home, Cloud9 may have a renaissance of because it's the only way that a whole bunch of people can sit together and work. They couldn't do it before. Well, where before they would sit next to each other in the office. Maybe they're going to adopt this instead. So there you go. We've gone from mocking it to saying, hey, how useful it might be.
That could work. Yeah, good idea.
Yep. Shall we move on to the databases section?
Yep.
So one thing caught my eye was the data migration service expressions.
Yeah, me too. Yeah,
that seemed like a kind of nifty feature. So you can basically, while you're doing a migration, while you're doing a sort of a ongoing sync with DMS, you can transform data essentially in the process. So you can. So a simple example is you can add a column to the target table that is like a full name column, and then you combine the first and last names from the source table and put them into the full name column in the target.
Yeah, or inject a timestamp and stuff like that. I think that could be massive. It's look like tiny announcement, but I think for people who run data pipeline and data ingestion, instead of, syncing and then running glue on top of that, they're going to be able to do it on the fly. I think it's going to be very, very useful for data ingestion into AWS cloud for data lakes and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I think it may find uses beyond migration. I think maybe they'll have to rename it at some point. But so another one of the features was you can mark a row that's been deleted from the source in the target without actually deleting the row. So that again, that's kind of potentially a neat feature, right? The other thing you mentioned was table headers. So you can grab the timestamp that a commit happened on the source table and write it to a column in the target table. So you can actually pull out that sort of data, as you're doing this thinking and essentially end up with a richer target table than you had in the source.
Yeah.
So I mean, potentially for archiving or for auditing, that'd kind of be neat. Like if you had to have a keep permanent record of changes that have happened to the data and deletions. In fact, GDPR it could be very useful for GDPR, because one of the challenges of GDPR, as you probably know, you can't just delete personal data. Well, there's two sides. One, you have to delete personal data. The other thing is you don't want to delete personal data, right? You've got to keep a record, but you've got to delete something, but keep a record of it for a period of time so someone can actually say, "Give me my data," right? So maybe there's some use cases here using these sorts of services that might come into their own in that sort of world. Anyway, yeah, I thought it was interesting new capability.
I've seen as well the SQL reporting, SSRS, can run on RDS now. That people have been waiting for that feature for probably 5 years or more. And you can run the portal, you can run everything, and you can run SSIS as well inside your RDS. That's available only for 2017, so not all the versions, but there was a lot of EC2 instance still hanging around running this type of services because people couldn't put them on RDS. Now there is no more excuses. RDS is the SQL of choice.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, not that I give a hoot about SQL Server personally, but yeah, it is one of those technologies that's often, as you say, it's often running on EC2 instances because of these sorts of shortcomings or limitations of how they've been implemented in RDS in the first place. So yeah, to see the capability being added so that people can make a choice to use RDS instead of spinning up EC2s, that's got to be welcome, I think, to anyone who works in this space.
Cool. Shall we move on to AI/ML?
Arjen, I know you want to talk about Deep Composer, so off you go.
Well, I wanted to give you the honor.
Well,
I'll be completely honest. I haven't looked whether or not is a big improvement.
So what does a real-time visualization look like? So you don't know. You don't know what it looks like.
No, I don't know what it looks like. I feel like it, because what would be my favorite thing if this announcement meant that you can now see key presses on the virtual keyboard.
Right.
But that is what it means.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that's not the case.
No. I'm sort of imagining, an iTunes visualizer style thing, just lots of like flashing colors and shapes moving around the screen, all excitably in response to your fantastic piece of music based on Wonderwall or whatever it was. But it's probably not that either. I'm pretty confident it's not that either. It's probably something far more mundane.
So what we can say here is that none of us really care enough about Deep Composer to have bothered looking at this.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
Arjen, do you have a keyboard from reInvent last year?
Yes, I got the keyboard. I got the official AWS branded one.
Yeah.
Which is double the price if you want to buy it from the same exact model without AWS branding.
All right.
Yeah, but you didn't pay for yours, did you? Because you're special.
I am so special. I got to stand for hours in line until I could get one for free. Yes.
Excellent. Well, money well spent in the form of time. Kendra, there was the other thing from this section that I thought it's probably worthy of a mention. Just if you're, I haven't seen it in anger used, but the idea of it's appealing. Kendra is the natural language search service, so it can connect to your ServiceNow, Salesforce instances and basically query them for results based on natural language searching and ML. So, I don't know how frustrating other people find, and I know not everyone has to use SharePoint, but, searching for things on SharePoint's a very demoralizing experience.
It never worked. You search stuff and nothing came out, ever.
Exactly. So, and I think that this kind of thing, as increasingly, I guess, enterprises invest in these monolithic tools like ServiceNow and Salesforce, people's chances of actually pulling out the information or even knowing where to look for the information that they want is probably compromised by just the sheer complexity and size of them. I haven't seen any user experiences of it saying how awesome it is, but I love the theory of it, and if anyone can do it, I'm guessing, AWS can probably have a good crack at it at least. So, yeah. Yeah,
because the promise is literally that it will surface the exact answer to your query.
That's right.
Instead of the usual search where, it might be in this file or this page or this, and then you have to click and search inside the page or document. But yeah, that's the promise, and we'll have to find out how
well it lives up to it. Yeah. And I think the idea too with the natural language search is that it kind of takes the next step too of not only understanding a query written in natural language, but also that it has its own internal understanding of the links between the language and the request you've made and what other things that might relate to. So, it does attempt to be intelligent about that. So anyway, we'll wait and see, I guess, how it pans out.
And let's go over anything else that came out that was generally other cool stuff. I don't know, technically speaking, not cool. Is Ultra Boom.
Boomtish. That's right. It's ultra cool. So yeah, I mean, I haven't used it, but the idea of it, as I understand it, is that it's making better use of S3 to store stuff. So you can store much larger volumes of data that you can still sort of bring into the search. and it does a lot of clever things with it does clever stuff to sort of pre-cache, pre-fetch data from S3 to make it to make it available to your queries. So it's like making that all that data that it's actually stuffed on S3, making that kind of transition into a search experience less like you're pulling it up off a slow storage. It's kind of hiding all that stuff for you. Yeah. I think that's the sort of the key to the price advantage of UltraWarm for large volumes, is that it is leveraging S3 and doing a lot of clever stuff, which I don't understand, but clever stuff with prefetching stuff as it's needed. So yeah,
that's good.
Another thing that got a lot of attention this time was Trusted Advisor.
Yeah.
5 new cost optimization checks. That's to help saving money.
Yep. That's nice. And there's now a couple of ways to get a multi-account summary as well, so that you can get the advisor to tell you everything that's wrong in all of your account instead of going one by one.
Oh, yes, I remember that people have been developing Lambda function and all that to go and interrogate and try to do a centralized report. So, that's good. That's good they came out with that now. Okay.
Yeah, so one of the options for that is the Trusted Advisor Explorer, which is an AWS solution. So that is basically, as you say, the AWS version of people building their own tools. You can deploy it in your account, and then it will interrogate all the accounts.
All right, that's not a service. That's build your own with CloudFormation. Thank you, AWS.
Yeah, but the other thing is the Systems Manager Explorer, which has it built in, but only for some of the checks.
Right.
Okay.
It mentions that it's for cost savings, performance, and reliability, and security. So I'm really not sure why they released both of these, considering they basically do similar things.
It's AWS. That's their speciality, having multiple products that not only sound the same but do similar things.
It's a five people pizza team, right? And then keep running as fast as they can in almost different direction, but that's why they release product at different time. Yeah, maybe innovation.
Yeah.
The best win.
The cost optimization checks are kind of interesting because they're sort of cutting the lunch of companies like Cloud Health, aren't they? Or products like Cloud Health. Doing the recommendations of RIs for all these different products, Elasticache, Redshift, Elasticsearch, and RDS. So they're providing recommendations for RIs in all of those cases. Do you think Cloud Health would be annoyed about that? I mean, people use that for a lot of that sort of stuff, don't they?
Well, it's always, unfortunately, and I'm sure that companies like Cloud Health know this better than anyone, AWS rolls stuff out themselves to do the same things, and what they will usually have to do is make sure that their solution or way of working with it is better.
Yeah.
It's a tough gig, I think, trying to develop something that kind of, I mean, and I think AWS probably, I don't know whether at some point they're going to get enough of a sort of reputation for doing this that people just stop developing for their platform. I guess that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But I'm sort of reminded of Twilio, who probably really made a huge impact on the market with telephony and all that, and of course we're always running on AWS from day one. And I wonder how they feel when Connect came along. Allowing people to do many of the same things that Twilio had built up a business doing for many, many years. It's kind of a repeating pattern that, it would certainly be pretty annoying, I think, if you'd built a business around it, and then AWS came along and said, "Oh, actually, we're in that market too."
Speaking of things that are also in the market too, so I got your comments for around the recent summits, which will show up in a soon-to-be-released different podcast. But AWS actually released a service for running media events.
Yes. Well, just a little bit too late. See, it wasn't ready in time for the summit, so they had to do something else. But this wouldn't have had those problems, Arjen. That's the message to take away from this, I think.
Yeah, or maybe after the summit they decided to quickly build this, and this is what they can do when they're really motivated.
Yeah, that's right. Could be. Yeah. The other thing in this section that I was going to touch on was the 90% price reduction for IoT device management jobs, because I like IoT, so anything that's got IoT in the name immediately attracts my attention. That's my networking, JM.
No worries.
But yeah, that's especially if you're actually using AWS to do fleet management of your IoT devices, that would be a very welcome change, I think, because it was pretty pricey to do this, and this will basically take the price for the first 250,000 remote actions per month to $750 USD. So it's 0.003. So it's what's that? That's a third of a cent basically per action, and that's things like if you wanted to reboot your device or do a firmware update or config change, stuff like that. Yeah. So if you have a fleet of thousands of IoT devices, I'm sure you'll find that change, and you need to manage them. You find that change in price makes that service a lot more attractive.
Oh, that volume, that for sure, yeah.
Okay, I think that's it then for today. JM, Guy, thank you both again for joining me and discussing everything.
Always a pleasure to discuss with you guys.
Yes, thanks for having us again, Arjen. Appreciate it.
It's always fun. And I also want to have a shout out to our sponsors, Enabler, our gold sponsor, and AC3 and CMD Solutions, who are silver sponsors for this year. And everybody else, thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you.
Bye.